This is a video about why we have emotions, and this will help us understand why sometimes emotions don't serve us particularly well and why we can't simply be happy all of the time. You see, humans evolved emotions many years ago simply to help us survive, and we evolved them at a time when we lived quite differently to how we live now. So for example, we lived in tribes or large groups of people, unlike the smaller families that we live in now. And also people encountered real life-threatening dangers more regularly than we would do nowadays. So surviving was really quite a serious business back then. So let's take a look at some of the dangers that people would have encountered back when we really needed those emotions to survive.
Compared to today, our ancestors probably encountered a lot more serious dangers than most of us do each day now. There were dangers like being attacked and eaten by a dangerous animal, of being killed by a human from another tribe. We could be kicked out of our tribe and have to fend for ourselves. There were dangers of coming to some physical harm, like getting a wound, and if you did that back then, it was more dangerous than it would be now because there were no doctors or medicines. There'd be dangers of eating something that poisoned you, if you tried eating a new plant that you'd not seen before, or if you ate some rotten food. So we evolved some emotions to keep us safe from life-threatening dangers like these.
So you might be wondering how emotions managed to keep humans safe from all those dangers. Well, it didn't always work, but they certainly did help because they gave warning signals and physical reactions that made surviving a bit more likely. So let's have a look at how some emotions might have helped with this.
Let's start with the emotion of disgust or feeling disgusted. When we encounter something that makes us disgusted, we tend to close our mouths and cover our nose. Quite often things that we find disgusting, like poo for example, are things that it would be dangerous for us to eat, or sometimes dangerous for us to breathe in. So being disgusted tends to make us so repulsed by something, our body pulls away from the disgusting thing that could potentially harm us. It stops us eating something that could poison us or make us ill. This certainly would have helped us to survive, and it still does to some extent.
Now let's look at an emotion that can make us react really quickly and for good reason. Let's consider the emotion of surprise.
Let's think about how the emotion of surprise makes us react. It tends to make our eyes go wide open and we really notice what's right in front of us. And it tends to make us able to react quickly, as we often get a little burst of energy and extra focus. It's an emotion that helps us respond to anything that stands out as different. This would have been really helpful for our ancestors if they came across a poisonous snake or a large cat that would happily eat them. They would really notice the danger and think quickly about how to keep safe, most probably by getting away really quickly or carefully backing away. So the emotion of surprise is another emotion that was important for keeping our ancestors safe.
And now let's have a look at an emotion that was probably one of the most important emotions for keeping our ancestors safe. Let's consider the emotion of fear.
Fear can arrive really quickly as soon as a threat or a danger appears. If one of our ancestors suddenly came across a large and dangerous animal that could eat them up in seconds, what do you think they'd need to be able to do? Well, they'd need to be able to get away, and really quickly. That's why when we feel fear, we get a burst of energy. There is a hormone released into our blood called adrenaline. You might have heard of it. Adrenaline is a hormone that makes us breathe more quickly and makes our heart pump faster, so that more energy can get to our muscles. This means we can move or run more quickly. That's why fear can feel like an emotion that takes over. Its job for our ancestors was to make us react quickly and get away from the danger.
Let's take a look at anger now. You can probably work out how it helped our ancestors, but let's take a look at it anyway.
Anger is another emotion that makes us release adrenaline in our body so that we get a burst of energy. Our ancestors would have used that energy to fight to protect themselves or the people in their tribe. If they became angry, they could act aggressively towards someone from another tribe who was attacking them or trying to steal their food, for example. This would hopefully make their attacker go away. Anger was about protection for our ancestors.
We didn't just evolve emotions to help keep us safe through our physical reactions. We also evolved emotions to help us behave in ways that made us more likeable, more likely to connect with other people, and less likely to be rejected. You see, because for our ancestors, if we were kicked out of the tribe, it would be a matter potentially of life and death, because we relied on our tribe, because we worked together to protect each other, to find food together, and to create shelter. So being kicked out of the tribe would mean that our survival was less likely. So therefore it's quite important to be accepted by the tribe. So let's have a look at some emotions that would help us be accepted by other people.
Can you think about the possible ways these emotions help us to behave in a way so that we are more accepted by others? The ways they help us to be kind, or that mean we were more likely to attempt to make up with someone if we fell out with them. So consider feeling guilty, sympathy, rejected, amused, love, or shame. You might want to stop the video to take time to think about this. We could say that these emotions are still very useful, as we need to be accepted by others to get on well in the world, even if these emotions are no longer needed to prevent us from being kicked out of a tribe. So let's take a look at each of these emotions one at a time, starting with feeling guilty. Feeling guilty usually happens if we've done something that harms or upsets another person, so it works usually by stopping us from doing whatever we did again. So we might feel guilty, for example, because we said something unkind to another person, and the guilt can make us feel like we never want to do it again. We feel sympathy for someone when we feel sorry for or sad about someone else's upset. So if a friend's pet died, for example, we would be sympathetic if we took the time to show some understanding for how upset our friend was. Feeling sympathy means we are more likely to care for others, and this makes us more connected to and appreciated by others. Feeling rejected can be quite a powerful emotion. This might be because when it evolved, rejection could mean we ended up being kicked out of our tribe, and this would threaten our survival, like I've said before. We would feel rejected if a friend started ignoring us, for example. People sometimes do this because we have done something that they didn't like. Feeling rejected can make us think about what we did to become rejected, and this will hopefully make us change our behaviour for the better. We feel amused when someone has made us laugh or entertained us in a happy way. If others amuse us, we usually like them and want to spend time with them. It helps people connect and enjoy spending time with each other. Love makes us feel warmth and affection for those we love. This makes us more likely to care, to be kind to, and to look after others, which would obviously help us connect with other people in our tribe. Shame is an emotion that teaches us not to do things that are wrong. Our parents and carers shame us or make us feel a bit bad sometimes when we do something wrong, usually by telling us off. This is to help us learn what is right. So shame evolved to help us learn which behaviours were acceptable and which ones weren't. Obviously, there are other emotions that we have evolved, but for some, experts are not completely certain why we evolved them, like sadness, for example. Some reasons we have been given for why we might have evolved sadness include things like to connect with those that we love. The sadness often makes us want to comfort the person who is sad. To show others we need help, crying in particular can indicate this. To make us leave something that has become pointless, so when we feel sad about something, it often means we give up on it. But sadness would also have given understanding to our tribe as a reason for us not taking part in something, so they would forgive us for not helping out.
So now we know what the jobs of emotions were and that they were mostly about keeping our ancestors safe at a time when they lived in quite a different way to how we live now, and there were generally more dangers around. Let's move on to looking at how sometimes these emotions can cause us difficulties or problems, especially now we live in quite a different way to how we did back then.
The thing about both fear and anger is that they cause our bodies to release adrenaline, the hormone that gives us a burst of energy. Fortunately, there are not many times nowadays that we need the protection of the power of anger or the burst of energy to help us run away from danger that's triggered by fear. But in our modern world, there are still triggers that make us feel threatened or in danger, even if there is no life or death, real danger. These triggers can be things that annoy us or get us really worried, like a test coming up. So when anger or fear are triggered, they are often like an overreaction, as the thing triggering anger or fear is usually not really a threat to our safety. So why is this a problem? Well, with anger, we get a burst of energy, and if we haven't learnt to manage it, this energy can sometimes turn into aggression towards whatever triggered our anger and make situations a lot worse. You can see how aggression was needed when we had to fight to prevent someone from stealing our food, but we don't often find ourselves in situations when aggression will actually sort anything out in our modern lives. And now let's look at fear. As humans, we can feel scared of things like having to perform in a play or even a lesson where we find everything quite difficult. Unfortunately, our body can't tell the difference between fears that are caused by real dangers that could actually harm us and fears where there's no actual real danger of getting hurt or losing our lives. So something like having a test the next day can trigger a fear response which can soon turn into worrying and can make us feel quite awful. Unless we learn to manage worry, we feel stressed, we might not be able to sleep, we can feel fidgety and unsettled, and we might start ruminating, which is thinking about the thing that's bothering us over and over again. And this reaction doesn't really help us at all, although some people might say it will get us to revise for our test, for example. So these two emotions were great for helping our ancestors to survive, but they can cause us a lot of bother nowadays if we don't learn to manage them.
So now let's take a look at an emotion that we evolved to make us more acceptable to other people, an emotion that can sometimes cause us quite a bit of difficulty.
Shame is an emotion that's used to help us learn what is right and what is wrong. When we get told off, we feel shame, and as long as we feel loved and supported by whoever told us off, we can cope with that shame, and it simply teaches us that what we did was wrong. Sometimes though, in our world where we meet many more people than we would have done if we'd been part of a tribe, other people can shame us by telling us off or insulting us, and this can really make us feel like we are rubbish. In other words, it knocks our self-esteem or makes us feel not very good about ourselves. So you could argue a little bit of shame from those that love us would be fine, but a lot from people we don't know very well can make us feel terrible. So it can be a tricky emotion to manage sometimes in our modern world.
So what have we learnt? We've learnt that emotions evolved to help keep our ancestors safe. We've learnt that we still have those emotions, but they're not so needed nowadays on a day-to-day basis for survival. And we've learned that some emotions can cause us difficulties, especially the ones that make our bodies release adrenaline if we don't learn to manage them well.